Okay, welcome everybody. This is the ESS Employee Self-Service Training. I am Jason Otoski. I work primarily out of the Meta Dayton office. I've been with Meta and the artist formerly known as Medeka. That's my favorite joke if you're a Prince fan for 20 years now. And I'd like to say it's going okay. I'll let you be the judge. Um, it is St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing my green. Hopefully everybody else is. You don't want to get pinched today like you were in middle school. I do have a couple of St. Patrick's Day jokes I'm going to be sharing throughout the presentation. I feel uniquely qualified for that because I have a tiny bit of Irish blood in me. Plus, my family and I went to Ireland last year. So we drove from Dublin all the way across the country to the Cliffs of Moher and back. We were there for a few days and it was fantastic. And I did drive on the left side of the road with the steering wheel on the right side of the car, and I did good. No crashes, no issues. Thank goodness the gas pedal and brake are in the normal spots, or it would have been a disaster. Let me tell you, you haven't lived until you've gone through 300 roundabouts going left instead of right. It's fantastic. All right, anyway, joke number one, very easy one. If you know it, feel free to unmute and give the answer. Feel free to type it in chat. What kind of spells do leprechauns use? Anyone? Anyone? Well, of course, they use Lucky Charms. It's also their favorite cereal. Anyway, we're going to get started on the real stuff. Okay, employee self-service. So why would you want to use employee self-service? Well, I can think of a few reasons. It's a great way to get your district able to see at a minimum your pay slips and W-2s. That could be all you turn on if you want to get started with ESS, and they can see their payslips and W-2s. Even former employees, if you still allow them into the software, can see them without having to contact the treasurer's office, which is kind of nice. So that's the minimum. It's also a great method for entering leave requests through a workflow approval process. We have a timesheet module, which we'll talk about toward the end of the presentation. Um, it's currently being offered for free, which is another benefit. I wouldn't say free. It is part of your core fiscal services that you already pay for. So at least currently, I can't say it's going to be the same way forever, but currently there is no additional cost for employee self-service. So that's another reason to get involved in the software if you choose to do that. And finally, and most importantly, you want to be as cool as your neighboring districts that are already on ESS. So if you're not using it, that would be a great reason to do it, just, to stay up with the times. Okay. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go over ESS from a user standpoint. We're going to show you some configuration items. I'm going to talk about ESS from a more of a managerial standpoint. We're going to look at the appendix and talk about some FAQ items. Maybe show timesheets briefly, just talk about that and go from there. So to get to ESS, I'm on our Meta website here. Go to Member Resources and Fiscal Services, and Links and Documents is the magic tab. And Employee Self-Service is down here on the left if you scroll down a little bit. If you choose your district here, you'll be taken right to the login screen. Okay. I have, I believe I am logged into a test instance of ESS for Miss Helen Dixie Holman. So we're going to look at some things for her. So when you first log into ESS, this is your home screen. Now you're going to see more. This is a test instance, so it's going to have not all the bells and whistles in it, but you're going to see a screen similar to this. It'll have more information on there, of course. If I was Helen, the very first thing I would do when I logged into ESS as a first-time user, down here at the very bottom left, if you can see that, is her name. If you click on the arrow next to it, that's where your profile is. So when I click profile, it shows me, the name, title, if there is one, your username to get into the software, your email address, a default leave request phone number can be put in if you want. There's also a dark mode, which a lot of people prefer. I don't, but if you do, go to your profile, go to your name, click profile, and then you can go in and out of dark mode very easily. You can also opt in and out of leave request emails and timesheet emails. Not sure why you would want to do that, but you can certainly do that if you want. One of the very coolest things in here is setting a default leave start time and a default leave stop time. So when a leave request is put in, if these are not set, it defaults to, I think, 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. or something like that, and you have to change that. Well, if you go ahead and set your default starting and ending time, let's say on a normal work day, I work something like 7:30 to 3:30. And make sure you choose your AM and PM appropriately. So when I save this, then when we go to put in a leave request later, I'll show you that it defaults to 7:30 to 3:30. And if I'm taking the whole day off, then I don't have to change anything about that. If I'm taking half a day, I could then change in the leave request, change it to, 11:30 or 12:30 or whatever the case may be. By the way, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Me and my fellow Meta fiscal people will help monitor that. If you have a question, you can also unmute real quick. And of course, Meta staff, if you want to add to anything I'm saying or correct me on anything or embellish anything I'm saying, feel free to unmute and go for it. Okay, another part of this area is the change password. So the system is set to, if it is set, it can send an email when your password is about to expire in ESS. So then you should ideally log in here and click the change password button. Okay, so then since you're already logged in, all it asks you to do is put in a new password twice and click change password. Has to have an uppercase letter or lowercase letter, at least one number and one special character, and it has to be at least 8 characters long. So then once you hit change password, that would be your new password for, we have it set for 90 days in configuration, which is an auditing standard that we have to follow. I wish we didn't, but we do. And then W-2 acknowledgement, we'll talk about this a little more later, but this is where if the digital W-2 is turned on, employees can go in here and show this. It'll show their status if they've agreed to the digital W-2s only. If they did, they would have a digital signature in there with whatever date. And then if they can print it if they want. If they decide to revoke that consent, then they can hit submit and they won't get their W-2 digitally only. It'll also be printed. Or they can check it, or it can be kept at consent to receiving digital only W-2. So that's kind of where that section is. And we'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later. Okay, so then back to home. Again, this is a test instance. You're not going to see a whole lot in here. When I click employee profile, this is where it would take you to everything about you as far as identification information goes in the software. All of this is pulled in from USPS. It is directly connected to the payroll software. So it shows your employee number, your state certification ID if you have one, your name, legal name and first name, last name, and all that if you have it. Other information like gender, marital status, date of birth, and so forth. There's some other tabs here. Contact info shows your address, phone number, email address. And then you have some dates like hire date, next evaluation date if that's something that's used, last paid date, and so forth. And finally, qualifications. It shows that Helen has a high school diploma. She also has a couple other credentials in here. Years of experience are pulled from USPS and so on. One of the good things if you're a treasurer is you can go into configuration, which I'll show you later, and hide some of the fields in here that don't necessarily need to be seen. So I'll show you that in configuration later, how to turn off some things in qualifications if you don't necessarily want your employees to see experience or any of these fields, they can be turned off. Something else I want to point out is there's a create new data change request button here. So at the employee level, if I'm looking here and I notice something is not correct, or maybe my contact info is changing, I have a new address or a new phone number, I can go in here and click create new data change request. So that opens up some fields here. And since this is a test system, some of the things aren't correct. I noticed here that the gender is probably not correct. So maybe that was put into USPS incorrectly or just because it's a test instance. So I'm going to change that to female for Helen, and then I'm going to submit data change request. Okay. So then it says operation successful. That does not mean anything was changed in USPS. What that means is you are requesting the change to see if it can be done. And that's from the employee level. So then if I go to data change here, again, I'm at the employee level. If I click data change, this shows my data changes in progress. Currently, it's set to initiated. So I can click view to view it, and then it shows current information, and I think it'll show what was changed, this to this. And then I'm going to close that. The status will change to exported if the person in your district with the data change manager role, the data change role, whatever that's called, they have the option to go in and they receive a notification about that data change request. They can then go into the software for data changes and decide whether or not to approve that, whether or not the change needs to be made. So then they have the option of changing it directly in USPS, or they can, if I go to my screen here, I'm logged in as somebody with a lot more access. I can go to data change management and I won't, oh, and actually I do see Helen's in here. So this was initiated. So then I can view it if I want to see exactly what change they're asking for. So then I have the option to close it and do it later. I can reject it or I can approve it. If I approve it, then it automatically gets sent over to USPS, which is great. If I don't want the system to do that for some reason, if I prefer to do it manually, I could reject it and then go make the change in USPS. But I kind of like the idea of just hitting approve here because then it shows that it was exported to the employee as well. And then it gets pulled back in from USPS to update that data. And so they will eventually see that. So I'm going to close that there. But that's how that works. The person with the correct role for data change management can go in there, see all of these requests, and then decide whether to approve them or not, and then send them over to USPS. Okay. Any questions on that part of it? Okay. So then we get into position details. Okay, this is a very unique employee. This employee has the superintendent, custodian, and teacher role. They're very active in their district. They wear a lot of hats, shall we say. So if they click on the arrow next to each one, it will show them information about their particular position. So in this case, this is the superintendent. It shows their active and inactive compensation records, who their supervisor email, and position hire date, position start date, and so forth. Okay, so same thing for the custodian position and same thing for the teacher position. One of the good things about this is you can see the teacher has, in this case, has no leave eligibility set. Neither does the custodian, but the superintendent does have sick and personal. So that'll come up later as we look at leave requests. Okay, view print payslip. Okay, so Helen has a few payslips in there from the past. If I want to view it on the screen, I can click the little eyeball view here and wait for the little blue bar to go across, and it will show me that payslip. Okay. This is just the view area, so I'm going to click close. If I want to download it for printing or just for saving to my computer, I can do the same thing, but it downloads it here. And then I can double click to open it. I can open the folder to move it to a different spot on my computer, whatever you want to do with it. But that's how you would look at your pay slips, and they automatically get put in here every payroll. Same with the view print W-2. There's currently none in here, but if your if your W-2s currently and from the past are loaded into USPS, then they will move over to ESS automatically. If you happen to have a W-2C form that was produced from USPS, that might show up in here as well. Okay, so if I was a district that was not using the leave request option, I would not have the leave information area. All of this wouldn't be there. It would just be things like employee profile, position details, payslips, and W-2s. Okay. Okay, moving right down the list here, we're going to get into leave information. Okay, so leave balances. The leave balances are synced with USPS every single night in the middle of the night. So they come over. So usually they're, 1 day old at the most. And usually they're pretty up to date. But this shows for leave balances, the monthly accrual, the unit, the absence max, beginning balance, and the balance. And these can be turned on and off by somebody with access to configuration. In other words, if I just wanted the employee to see leave type and unit and balance, you could do that. And it'd be a little more of a simpler view. There's also absences. So you can see, your sick, your personal, whatever absences you've taken. You can filter by activity date if you want. Okay, there's a few of them in there. And also accumulations, what has been accumulated for you as far as sick or personal or whatever the case may be. And again, you won't see any of these unless you actually have access to sick and personal for the accumulations. Okay, so let's look at, we'll go back to leave request. Um, I want to look at my leave calendar. So right now there are no leave requests that Helen has done for March. I'm going to go back in time here because it's a test system and it's kind of old data. So I'm going to keep going back until we see some data, maybe from, might be as far as 2021. Maybe there's not any in here. I'll have to show you that in the supervisor view. But this would be her leave requests for her leaves only. There's also a job calendar, which I'm pretty sure there's some data in here. She's on a job calendar in 2025. So these are set up straight pulled from USPS. This is just what her job calendar looks like as far as what work days are there, what holidays are there. So we can see there's a holiday on July 4th here, and the others are work days. Okay. So again, that's just pulled from her calendar from USPS. And again, this is for the superintendent position. The custodian probably has a completely different calendar. In the test system, of course, they don't. Okay, data change I already showed you. Um, let's look at leave information. Oh, I showed you that already. So let's go ahead and go to leave request. If you click the arrow next to leave request, for this user, there are just two options. My leave request, which shows all the leave requests that are in process, and currently there's none in there. But if Helen wants to create a leave request, she's going to click the little plus sign. Okay, and now she has to choose which position this applies for. And this is going to be an important first step because if I choose the teacher, and you'll see the blue bar go across, there's only the default ones that don't have personal, sick, or vacation in there. Okay, same with if I choose custodian and let it refresh. I don't have those either. I do have professional and so forth. But then if I go back to superintendent and let it refresh, now I can see there's also choices for personal and sick. Okay, since for that position under leave information, they did have those checked or they did have balances for those and it was turned on, but vacation was not. Okay, so if Helen wants to create a leave request, she's again going to go in here, leave it at the superintendent position. Let's say it's a sick day. A reason can be set to be optional or mandatory. I would usually, depending on the leave type, you'd want to make it mandatory. Um, it can be simple as not feeling well or green beer from St. Patrick's Day yesterday. You probably wouldn't want to put that, but you could. Notice in here, the 7:30 to 3:30 is automatically in there because I set it in my profile information. Okay, so that's in there. Let's say I want to take Friday off this week, so I'm going to change the date to 3/20. It automatically changes it here. If I wanted to do 2 days, let's say I go back and take Thursday and Friday off, so I could do Thursday to Friday. And let's say they're going to be whole days, so I'm going to use the plus sign here to go up to 2 days. Okay, and you'll notice that as I click the plus and minus sign, it goes down by 0.5. And that's another thing that can be set in configuration. You can set it to either quarter days, half days, or whole days. So that's the only choice right now. I know there's an enhancement request in there to be able to do that by certain leave types or um, certain classifications. So hopefully they'll be making changes for that soon. You can also set it for no restrictions. So that could be a little scary. Then you wouldn't see the plus sign. They'd be able to type in whatever it was, like 0.75 of a day, 0.33 for a third of a day, like 1.75 for a day and 3/4. So that could get complicated. So usually districts keep it at either a quarter or half day. So in this case, I'm going to do 2 days. Okay. Then you can put a phone number in if you want. You can put comments in pertaining to this leave request. That's different than the reason. So if you have comments in here that you want to kind of sway your supervisor into approving this request, you can put them there. Substitute comments. So it says enter the name and contact information if available for any possible subs you would like to have called. Also, enter any notes to the substitute. So even if you put that data in here, it does not necessarily mean that that particular substitute will be assigned. It's just an option. Somebody that the sub coordinator could call for you because they could see that you like them in your classroom. Make sure you check substitute needed. There is also a configuration setting that would have that be checked automatically. And if they didn't need one, then they would go in and uncheck it. Then it shows their supervisor name, their supervisor email, and if there's any attachments that want to be put in with this request, they could click upload files and find it on their computer and attach it there.
Jason.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know, sorry to interrupt, but we did have a good question. So before you save or submit this leave, if we can test this out for the user,
Oh, yeah.
the
Sure.
question, yeah, the question was, does it show an error like you've put in 2 days, and let's say you put in the 19th and end was also the 19th. Can you
Mhm.
change the end date to the 19th and let's show them if that gives them an error if they've put in 2 days, but the start and end dates don't match up?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you,
So
sir.
we'll change the end date back to 3/19 to 3/19. Again, it's 7:30 to 3:30, but I've put in a total time requested of 2 days. Okay, so everything else looks okay. So I'm going to hit create leave request. And yes, it is smart enough to give that error. It says length of absence is 2. Let's try that again. We went way too fast, but there was only 1 day in requested range. So yes, that's a great question. And that leads into the next thing I wanted to show you. So let's say you're doing 3/19 to 3/20. Okay, so it's 2 days of leave, but let's say it's only a day and a half. Okay, so the system wants to know, or the system is going to want to know, how are you going to break that up? Are you doing half day on the first day? Are you doing half day at the end of the second day? So when you hit create leave request, it brings up this little menu here, and you're able to then put in the specifications. Let's say I'm working the morning of Thursday the 19th, and then I'm taking off that afternoon plus the whole next day. I can then put in my start time. Let's say start time for the leave is going to be 12:30 p.m. To 3:30 and then 7:30 to 3:30 the whole next day. Okay, so then I can accept that. If it's the opposite, I would just make this a day, make this half a day, and then change the times accordingly. That would move to 7:30, and then maybe this would move to more like 12:30. And again, make sure you're doing your AMs and PMs correctly. That's important. Okay, and then I would accept that and go from there. I see another question in there. What if the time is incorrect? They enter it 7 to 3, but listed as half a day. Um, I think it's less um, strict about that, but let's see. So if I put in, um, let's say I put in 1 day, but then I do, you know, let's say it's only till 11 a.m. Okay, but it's a whole day. If I hit create leave request, it's gonna want more details. So it's kind of a check there because it kind of sees that maybe the time is a little off, or maybe it's bringing that up because I changed it from what I had before. But I would just verify, make sure the times are correct. Kind of train your employees to look very carefully at that. Our staff seem to be able to enter it and it gets submitted and I have to reach out and correct the time. Yeah, that's probably true because the system honestly doesn't know if a whole day for you is 3 hours or a whole day for you is 8 hours. It really doesn't know that. So the days it's a little smarter about, but as far as the times go, they may have to have the leave request edited if that is put in by mistake. Okay, yeah, and we'll see if there's an enhancement on that can stop that from happening. Yeah, they'll list it from 8 to 11:59. I'm sure that's common. And then the supervisor doesn't look close enough and it gets approved. So yeah, that happens. In that case, at least it was just one full day, even though the time is not correct. At least they'll only get one full day put in there usually. So we'll go from there. Okay, any other questions on the leave request part? Okay, thanks for those. Okay. Again, my leave request would show any leave requests in process. I did not submit that one. So if I go back in here, let's say it's a sick. Let's say the reason is don't feel well. And I'm going to go just one day tomorrow, 318 to 318, one full day. Um, no comments. Well, I'll put in a comment. I really try to sway that manager. I don't need a sub in this case, or maybe I do. Let's say I like Bob Hope in my classroom. I'm going to say sub needed, and I'm going to create that leave request. So if a substitute is needed, who receives that information? The substitute coordinator does, and we will get into that soon. Is that only a data change manager? The data change manager is separate from sub coordinator. They get notification of leave requests, or I'm sorry, of data change requests, and then they go in and deal with those. So we're going to go in and see who has actually access to what. Is there a way for this information to be shared with the ESC for teacher subs? Um, I don't think it's that advanced. I think it's shared only between the sub coordinator and whoever is requesting the leave. When you're getting into deeper substitute information, you may have programs like Aesop. We also have a program coming out soon that will help with this, with the sub calling part and so forth. And there may be some options with that as well. If the employee does not have the leave time that is requested, will it give an error? It could. So we will look at that in configuration also. There is a setting for allow negative leave request or not. And so if that is not check marked, it will probably give the user a warning, but it'll still let it go through. And then it's up to the supervisor to either approve or deny that. If the box is check marked next to that type of leave, then yeah, it will stop them from putting in that leave request if it's going to make their balance go negative. That's a good question. Okay. So I think everything is in here. Oh, actually, no, I haven't finished it yet. I should have finished it before. We're going to do just one full day. We're going to do sick. It also shows, by the way, the balance here. So if I put in sick, it's going to show me that my current balance is 17.5 days. If I was to choose personal, okay, then it's going to refresh. And so I have a full 3 days of personal available. Okay. And then for other types of leave that don't have balances that are stored in the system, like military or jury duty, they would just go away. So there's nothing there for the balance. Okay. So I'm going to do sick again. Okay. Probably have to have a reason in there. And the sub, maybe I did save that. Oh, well, we'll have it in there twice if I did. And create leave request. Okay, so then it tells me operation successful, email sent. So an email would be sent, I believe, to you and to your first approver. So now if I go to my leave requests, I should see a request in there with initiated status. And actually I did put that other one in. So I do have two in there, one for 317 and one for 318. So let's say I didn't mean to put the 318 one in there. So let's take a look at that. Okay, and again, I'm at the user standpoint here. So let's say, I can go into edit mode and I can change something about it. Maybe it was only supposed to be half a day and then I can save it. Um, Maybe I want to change the reason or add a comment or change the sub. So I can do that at this point because it's only got initiated status. But also, if I really didn't mean to put it in, I can go in here and click cancel request. Are you sure you want to cancel this request? You can say, yes, I put it in by mistake and click yes. Okay, so now instead of initiated, it has a status of canceled, and an email is then sent to you and your first approver saying, hey, this is actually canceled. They don't really want to do this request. I do still have the one from 318 in initiated status, so that is still going to go through the workflow. And you can also print the approval trail report if you want. If I was to go into these details again, there are, I believe, 3 tabs at the top: leave request details, leave request daily details. So if I did have it on multiple days, 2.5 days, and it would show which day, it would show the breakdown in here. And then leave request approval trail, what has happened so far. So at first it was submitted, okay, and shows what group chain it was part of. That's the workflow and the timestamp. So I entered it, and then literally a minute later, I canceled it. Okay, so that is the leave request approval trail. Okay, so then if I go to the one that is still in initiated status, we can look at it. Again, look at the daily details, and then the approval trail is pretty short. It just shows that it was initiated at 1:28 p.m. Okay, so I'll close that. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. It won't put an absence in USPS until it's fully approved, and then there's a whole export process it has to go through. Okay, so that is the majority of this area. I'm not going to show you timesheets now. We'll kind of look at that at the very end of the presentation. Um, but that is in a nutshell kind of what the user sees from their standpoint. They can view their W-2s and payslips. They can look at their leave balance information, employee and position details. They can look at their job calendar and their own leave calendars. So now I see in here, and I'm colorblind, so I hate the colors, but this one looks kind of red. So if I click on it, it's going to show me that this one from the 17th was in there, and I can look at the leave request approval trail and see that it's canceled. And then I can look at the current one that is still active, and it shows the details about that. Okay. So that is your own leave calendar where all of your own leave requests are. Okay. Now, if I'm Helen and I have a request, or I'm kind of new to the district and I want to figure out how to do things, if I go to help and documentation, that's going to take me to my handy dandy little employee self-service manual. So if I click on that, it takes me to this tab, which it'll take you to the very top here to the employee self-service manual. Okay, so this is really what we're going to go over moving forward after I show you a little bit more about the configuration items and so forth. But you have to kind of scroll down quite a bit until you get to the table of contents, which shows you a lot more about each topic that you want to cover. Okay, so back on this screen here, I am logged into a test instance of ESS as a user with more access than the regular user has. Okay, so if I look at users, I'm going to look at my own, and I am an admin. Okay, so there's several roles in here that can be given to an employee. The default and the most basic one is user. That's what Helen had. But if you have the access to go in and change that, and that's something that we do as well when we set people up, there's a lot of different roles in here. Okay, so we are always going to be admin, the metaphysical people. Usually the treasurer, maybe superintendent, maybe, the treasurer's office employees are going to be district managers. They have a lot more of other powers in here. There's also announcement board manager, leave workflow manager, and so forth down the line. Data change manager, substitute coordinator, there's several sub-coordinator roles, and then a timesheet approver. So as we set up a user or as you set up a user, it's kind of important to know what you need them to do so that they have the correct roles and correct privileges to be able to see and do exactly what they need. Does ESS talk with Frontline Aesop? It can. There are some districts that are doing that. It does have, it's working great. There are some issues with that they've cleared up in the past. The thing with that, um, the thing with that part is it's kind of one-way communication. I mean, it is and it isn't. There's a couple ways you can set it up. You can do ESS and Aesop completely separately. You can turn on the integration, which then the users that do not need a sub put leave requests in on the ESS side. The users that do need a sub put their leave requests in on the Aesop frontline side, and then it flows into ESS where it can then be exported into USPS. So that's the caveat. Um, those who want to request with a sub don't put it directly into ESS. They have to put it into Aesop, which means everybody has to be added to Aesop who's going to need a sub. And I think there was an issue earliest where all the employees needed to be in there, whether they needed a sub or not. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I think so. But we have a couple districts that are using that. So if you want more information about that, we can certainly get that to you. Okay. So that's a little bit about roles. We'll talk about roles more as we go along here as well. You're welcome. Okay. I think before we get into the next part, which is going to be configuration, I think it's time for joke number 2. It is St. Patrick's Day. We got to lighten the mood a little bit here. Take a deep breath. This is another fairly easy one. If you know it, shout, type it in the chat, whatever you want to do. So why shouldn't you iron a 4-leaf clover? Come on, you know it. Anyone? Yes. Very good, because you will just press your luck. All right, congratulations. You get for that comment, you get
Virtual chocolate.
close. You get the virtual shamrock. There you go. Congratulations. I'm proud of you. You got it. Hopefully, I'll get you on the next one. Okay, so again, I'm logged in as somebody with admin access, so I can see pretty much everything on this side. You guys won't see, even if you have district manager access, you won't see everything that I'm seeing here. But I want to go in to system, and real briefly, I want to look at configuration. Oh, also, down here under configuration is the USPS data sync. So I wanted to show you that it syncs overnight. In this case, it was last done at 3 in the morning. That was for positions. And then right after that, it did it for leave balances. So it'll do that overnight, like I said before. If you're a district manager and let's say your payroll person enters a new employee and you want all their data to come over, you can sync positions and sync leave balances manually, and it just takes a few minutes to do. Also, if your payroll person posts leave and it gets updated and you want it to show immediately, you can sync leave balances manually if you don't want to wait for that to happen overnight. Also, when you're adding a new employee, they need to go into USPS first. So you don't have to rely on us to do that for you. District managers can go into users and click users. Okay, and that shows everybody in the district. So you're going to want to click create, and they have to be in USPS first because you're going to pull them straight from USPS. Okay, so I'm going to pick someone and they're probably already in there, so it's not going to work. Or maybe it did. So when you choose someone from payroll, then it automatically fills in a lot of their data, first name, last name, their email address, which has to be in there, and it makes them enabled. So then you go down and make sure they're set to user. If they need any other roles, you would go ahead and select them by checking or unchecking. You would then put in their username, and usually that's going to match their email address. So I would just, right click, copy and paste that into their username area. If they have a title, that can be put in there if you want, and then click create. So that's how a new user is created. If you have district manager status, I believe you can also reset their password by clicking the key here. So if I wanted to reset my password or this person's password, I would click the change password button and then put the new password in twice and click change password. That's also valuable for, if you're adding a new employee or someone's new to the district, instead of relying on that email to come when they hit change password, you can tell them what their temporary password is because you set it manually. Then they can use that as a temporary to set a new one. So that's kind of handy to do. Okay, let's get into configuration here. And again, if you have district manager access, you'll be able to see that. So I'm not going to go over everything in here. But I did want to look at a couple of things. There's some of these in here are strictly to show you what the emails are going to look like that get sent out. And so if you want to change the wording of some of these emails, you can do that. 99% of the time, you're just going to leave them as is, I think. So for example, this data change email configuration, when a data change is initiated, this is the subject that will come in the email. And it literally says a data change request has been submitted with the following details. And then it shows what was put in. And then that's it. So if you wanted to change that, you could. I really don't see a reason to do that. You'd have to go into edit mode and then change what it says. Okay, so that's one option there. Um, Default substitute for appointment type. If you want only certified users to have the default substitute box automatically checkmarked when they put in a request, you can click that. And then if you want classified to have to click it manually, um, then you would leave it like this. If the certified employee did not need a sub, then they would have to uncheck that box on their screen before they put the leave request in. So that's what this means here. It's the option for making it automatically check marked on the leave screen or not. ESS functionality. This is where we turn on and turn off what you're actually going to be using. So if leave requests are not on, let's say you're just a payslip district and W-2 district, it would look more like, you know, this. It might have announcement board and custom link board in there, but you really would only see payslips and W-2s. Other districts that do have leave calendar or the leave request turn on, they would have all of these turned on, so it would show a lot more. But that's kind of how we turn on and turn off the modules that are going to be needed to show. And I will let that refresh. And then email configuration, we set that up when you're with the district. The one thing we ask you is the default address. Or I'm sorry, the default from address. This is, who do you want emails to come from in the district? And it's kind of just to say, instead of coming from Postmaster, which a lot of email programs don't like, we need a real email address in there so that the from field, it looks like it's coming from the payroll employee or from someone else in the district.
That's
Here's
a
where we
very
get
good
into what
employee.
shows on the employee profile configuration. So like I was saying before, if you don't want a lot of information to show on there, so if I go into edit mode and let's say in the other information field, I don't necessarily need it to show the OSDI or the spouse's first name. Maybe in dates, I'm sorry, you can turn off dates completely if you want, or I can go and get more specific and say I don't need it to show the ODJFS hire date. I don't care about the contract renewal date and so forth. So you can turn on and off what you want the employees to see and what you don't want them to see here. And that's just for the employee profile configuration. It's very similar for the job status configuration and the position details configuration. So if you look at those, job status, do you want it to show just active and inactive positions? That's usually, you don't really need them to see deceased or terminated. Sometimes maybe not even inactive, but a lot of districts have those two show up. And then with position, there's a lot more choices. So if you want to clean it up a little bit and maybe not show the salary schedule information if you're not using it, um, some districts don't need it to show department code or building code or whatever the case may be. Okay, so that's what those are. Forgot password configuration. We usually set this up. You can change it for the minutes till expiration when they click forgot password. You can, maybe make it 30 minutes or 60 minutes that they have until they're no longer able to reset that password. And then the temporary password length, 30 seems really long to me. So I would change it to 8 or 10 or whatever you want their new password to have to be. And then make sure you save that. Okay, when an email question over here, when an employee gets locked out of ESS or forgets their password, some employees, not all, get a message saying that they will receive an email to reset their password. However, they never receive an email. Can that be changed? Well, I wish it could. Ideally, everybody would get their email. Like Jen says, the email may be being blocked by the spam filter depending on what the from address is. Usually, if they have a district email address, it goes through more easily. Sometimes when you have email addresses like the Gmail or Hotmail or well, other ones than that, they need to be whitelisted. And there's some what they call SPF records that we can put in for districts or your tech people can put in to allow those emails to flow through. Sometimes we go through all that and some employees still don't receive their emails or they go to junk or whatever. So, there's only so much you can do. If you have an employee that is just not receiving emails, I would have them try a district email address instead or a different personal email if the one they're using just isn't receiving anything. But yeah, sometimes it's being blocked by a spam filter or we need to make sure the from address is showing as, a real email address. So it does so that the emails like the from address is, and so forth. Okay. Leave expenses configuration. If you're allowing professional leave to go in, you do have the option for the expense sheet to show. So if you want to put in, let's say, the new mileage rate, um, I think it's 72.5 cents per mile now. So that would be 0.725. Make sure you don't put in 72.5. I think that's right, right? Because I think if you put it in as, yeah, it's not even, I don't think it's going to let you do that. But it might. But anyway, 72 cents a mile in this case, it would be 72.5, which is the new federal rate this year, I believe. And you can say what you want to show on that professional leave form and what you don't. So if you're not going to have anybody put in a budget account, or maybe just the approver might put a budget account in, it doesn't flow to USAS, but it's just good information to have. Estimated costs, event location, leave purpose, vendor location, all of that's good information to have on there. And then make sure you click save. And that's again just for professional leaves, or it's for leaves where you turn expenses on for other than professional leave, if you choose to do that. Okay, let's look at W-2 configuration. Again, this is for if you want digital only W-2s to be a thing in your district. Um, this is where if it's turned on, the next time the employee logs into ESS, they have to say yes to digital only W-2s or no to digital only W-2s. So if they say yes, then they will only be able to get a W-2 in ESS electronically. If they say no, then they can still see it in ESS, but they will also get the printed copy like they always have. And this is what they will see when they log in. And so they read that and then they decide whether to say yes or no. And as I showed you before, if they change their mind, they can go into their profile down here and they can go to W-2 acknowledgement, which when I was logged in as Helen, it worked, but that's where Helen would go to change the W-2 acknowledgement here. Um, I think currently it is set to accept, but she could click result or revoke and hit submit, and then she would start getting the paper copy again. Okay. All right. So then back in configuration here. I think that's all I wanted to show you in configuration. A lot of this stuff we set up for you when you move on to ESS, so you'll never have to go in here for much. But I did want to kind of explain where some things are and what you can do if your employees are seeing too much on their position screens or their job screens or in their leave balance area and so forth. Okay, so let's look at ESS more from the manager, district manager kind of point of view. So up here at the very top, again, if you click home, this is what you see when you log in. If I'm an approver for leave requests, I will see pending workflow tasks. So those show right here, which is kind of handy. If I have a ton of them coming in, and I'm not Helen's supervisor, unfortunately, or I would see hers, but you can then put a check mark next to the ones you want to approve or reject, or you can click here to select everything down here and then click approve or reject, and they're all taken care of. Of course, you're always going to encourage your supervisors and approvers to view every single leave request in detail to make sure that they actually do want to approve or reject it. Then once they have done that, they can click all and then click approve or select the individual ones to reject. But that's kind of nice to do that here right on your home screen, which is the first thing you see when you log in, instead of having to go down here to leave request approval. Okay. If I click leave request approval, I see a larger screen really of the same stuff. I can go down here and see what leaves I want to approve or reject, and then click the approve and reject button up here, or I can again select them all and do the same thing. Okay, so same as a regular employee, there's an employee profile and a position details. In this test instance, I'm not hooked up to their USPS, so I don't have a position details or an employee profile. I wouldn't have payslips or W-2s in here, but I did show you that on Helen's screen. Okay, same with leave information. Sub-coordinator. Let's look at some sub-coordinator items. Okay, so whoever has the sub-coordinator role or whoever has the district manager role, which I do, they're able to see the sub-coordinator information. So when I click sub-coordinator, it shows me all the leaves that are currently in there that did have need sub check marked when they were put in. So then as the sub-coordinator, I can print the approval trail, I can edit, I can view what's going on in here. So if I view this one, it shows that this particular teacher put in sub needed for Bob Hope. So then I can go into edit mode. And as the sub coordinator, I say, okay, here's the sub that's put in. Bob was available. I can put his phone number in if I have it. And then I make sure I check substitute scheduled. And then down here, oh, if I have anything else to upload, I can do that as well. I don't think I would in this case, but I could. And then you click save. Okay, so then if I do that, then it's going to show Helen on that request that a sub was scheduled and who it was. Okay, so let me go back to Helen's screen and I'm going to go to my leave requests. Okay, so this is still an initiated status, but the sub coordinator was moving fast today. And I can see that a substitute has been scheduled and that it was Bob Hope. And again, this has nothing to do with any sub-calling software. The sub-coordinator, if they're not using sub-coordinator software or sub-software of any kind, would then have to manually call the person and you know, all that happens outside of ESS for now. Okay, so back to the supervisor or the sub-coordinator area. This one I have no sub to schedule because the leave was canceled. Okay, so I would obviously have nothing to do with that. So if we look at, I want to show you a little more detail about the sub-coordinator. So if I'm in the documentation, I can click on sub-coordinator and it just gives you a little more information, kind of shows you a pretty good screenshot of how it's going to look. You can edit the existing leave request to enter sub information, sub comments, first name, last name, the phone number, and make sure you check sub scheduled and click save. All the leave requests that have been checked substitute needed, regardless of their approval status, will show. And that's why we saw the canceled one, even though it was canceled, it still showed up. The substitute column will be checked to indicate that the subscheduled flag has been checked on the leave request. So I didn't see sub comments. I probably just missed it. You could have put sub comments in there as the substitute coordinator, but the subschedule box is what I checked. I put in the first and last name, and then I chose not to put a phone number in. Okay. And then Helen was able to see it on her side. Now the roles associated with sub coordinator, there's a lot of them in there. So that's why I wanted to show this to you. The sub-coordinator role by itself has access to the sub-coordinator area, which allows that person to enter all sub information for all submitted leave requests where the sub needed is selected. Okay. It also grants access to the leave request view district leave area. So a person who might be assigned the sub-coordinator role by itself might be a district administrative person. There's also sub-coordinator read-only, sub-coordinator by building, sub-coordinator by building read-only, sub-coordinator by department code, by pay group. So all of these have different roles and different access. So a sub-coordinator read-only, they have access to the sub-coordinator area for all submitted leave requests, but they cannot put in the actual sub information. They just can view it. So who might need this might be a staff member who needs access to see the sub info but doesn't assign them. The sub coordinator by building could only see leaves in their particular building that need a sub, like a building principal might want that one. But with this role, it will pre-filter the grid, allowing you to view and edit leave requests with the same building as in your position. So it doesn't show you those leaves that need a sub for the whole district, just the ones in your building. And then we have a sub coordinator by building read only. You can again see them in your building, but not put the sub coordinator in. And then we have by department code, by pay group. So if you had that role, you could only see leaves put in that need a sub that have the same department code as you or the same pay group as you. For example, a food service manager might need that, or a head custodian if they enter subs in for those types of employees of theirs, and so forth. Okay. So if you have more than one sub-coordinator role assigned to you, which could happen, the roles will be combined, displaying all leave requests that would fall under your role. So if you have a sub-coordinator by building role, as well as by department role, you would see both in the sub-needed area, in the sub-coordinator area. And then if the sub-coordinator or sub-coordinator read only, with those roles, they receive an email when a leave request is created, rejected, or canceled. Again, if they're a sub-coordinator, that's for everybody. If they're a sub-coordinator by building or by department or pay group, they only receive an email if that particular group puts in a leave, like it says here. And then there's a sub-coordinator export grids icon, and that gives you a CSV report if you wanted to get more information about that. Okay, any questions on that part of it? I just wanted to go into a little more detail about what these roles mean, because I know it gets confusing, but you can always go into the documentation and review that in the future again if you need to assign a certain role to a certain person. Okay, let's go back to this screen here. So we went over the sub-coordinator area. Leave request approval, I did show you that. That's the same little expanded version of what's on the home screen as far as being able to request leaves. So you are the approver for a leave request if you are in the workflow that is that is part of the leave request. So we have groups, which are approval groups, and then we have group chains, which are the actual workflows. So if you are in an employee's workflow as an approver, then you will see their leave under here as far as approval goes. And we'll get into a little bit more about that here shortly. Leave request area. So this is where you can create a leave request, which I did show you earlier. you can, this is a very cool feature, which is something that we wanted to have in the employee kiosk for a while, the elevated create leave request. So this allows a user with district admin access, I believe, to put in a leave, or and maybe you have to be their supervisor. I can't remember. We'll look at that in a few minutes, but put in a leave request for an employee. So let's say, unfortunately, they were in an accident, they're in the hospital, they need to request leave and they can't. You could click the plus sign here, choose the employee, and put in a leave request for them. So again, you would just go through the process. It looks pretty much exactly the same as if you were putting it for yourself, except you're actually putting it in for your employee. And again, not everybody has access to do that, but it is very handy when it needs to be done. So Lynn says we are wanting to use one system for all leave approvals rather than have employees go into two systems, Frontline, Aesop, and ESS. Why can't, once the request is approved, it then be sent to Frontline to coordinate subs? Is something I need to reach out to Frontline on. That's a very good question. It is just how ESS, when it was being developed and they were working with Frontline, they tried because Aesop and Frontline were also integrated in kiosk and it just was not working properly. So when they designed ESS, they went in and said, how can we prevent all the problems in ESS that we used to have with kiosk? And this is what they decided. So if you're using Frontline and Aesop integrated, there's just no way around having to put the leave request in on the Frontline side. It would be great if you could put it in on the ESS side and it would flow to ESS. But if you want everybody to put it in on the ESS side, if they need a sub one way or another, they're still going to have to put it in on the Frontline side. And there's just no way around that for now. And we have had districts who have started using the integration and then they turned it off because they just didn't like how it was working. Um, and we do have districts that are using it fine. You know, their teachers are used to putting in, if they need a sub, they put in Aesop on the Aesop side, and if they don't, they can put it in on the ESS side. Some have them trained to only put it in on the Frontline side, and it'll still flow to ESS. But they really wouldn't do that unless they needed a sub. So there's no easy answers. I know it would be ideal if you could put it in ESS and it would flow to Aesop, but it's just not the way they designed it to make it work better, in other words. So once it's put into Frontline, it does flow into ESS, and then it's in there as a leave request, and then it is able to be exported into USPS as if it had been entered in ESS. Um, so when you put it into Frontline as a leave request with the needing a sub, it then would flow into ESS. It's just that if you put it into ESS, it won't flow back to Frontline saying I need a sub. And that's kind of the key. Approvals are done on the Frontline side. So there is a workflow that has to happen on the Frontline side to get it approved, and then it flows into ESS. Any other questions? Yeah, I know it's not ideal, but it's kind of what we're dealing with at the moment. Okay. Another option as a supervisor, you can be in a workflow with your name as the approver. You can also be in there as a generic supervisor. And if you're a generic supervisor, it means that you are in USPS listed as your employee supervisor on the position screen. So if you are a supervisor in there, or if you are the approver, you can then go into view supervised leave. So this will show you everybody that has a leave request under you and what's going on with it. You will still want to go to leave request approval to approve or reject the leave, but this is where you can view your supervised leave to see those leave requests. If you have district manager access, you have the power to view all district leave. So if I click view all district leave, I can then see all pending leaves in the district. And as district manager, I can then choose to approve them or deny them as needed. So if I go into Helen's here, and actually that's not correct in this area. Even though I am district manager, I can't approve it from this area. I think you have to go under leave request approval and you'll see everybody with that status. With your status as manager, you'll be able to see all the leaves and then approve them from there. And so that's kind of avoiding the workflow. So if you have a supervisor who is out and can't approve pending leaves and you don't have time to change a workflow or to get someone else in there, you can go into leave request approval and approve it that way as a district manager, as a district admin. But that is a way, if you have that access, you can go in here and view all the leave for the whole district in there at once. And then you have supervised leave analysis. I can't show you that, but it is a way to run reports to show those leaves that you are approving. You can get a little more information and do a little more analysis on those as far as running reports and seeing trends and so forth. I do want to show you leave calendars. Again, my leave calendar would be just my leave request, like I showed you on the other screen for Helen. She can go to my leave calendar and see her leaves from any month or for the current month. There's also district leave calendar. This is kind of nice for those with the district manager access. They can go in and see leaves from, let's see if it'll show them from maybe 2021. Let's see if we have any data in there. I thought we might, but we don't. But anyway, this is all the leaves for the whole district in calendar format. And you can print the calendars now, which I don't think the kiosk printed those very well, but you can print them in CSV format. You can print it to PDF, the whole month to a PDF. So it's got a few more options as far as that goes. Do we have the ability to change the request from sick to personal? Yes, you do. So if you go into my leave requests, and let's go back in here as Helen, I'm going to go into my leave requests. This is still initiated. So there are some things you can do when it's initiated. Once it's approved, you have less options as far as editing. Once it's exported, you have even less. So if you go into edit mode, okay, you can change it to, let's say, personal, and then click save. So now if we look at the details for that again, so it shows the leave request was edited. It was submitted to the workflow again for approval. And it'll show the first approver that it used to be a sick, but now it is a personal. So yes, that is possible to do. Will you show once it is approved and what can be changed? Let me see. I don't know if I can approve it in there. Let me try on the other screen. That would be under leave request approval. Yeah, it's not showing in there. I'm not sure that these two are connected appropriately. So I can't show that. But I will say, I was going to show you this later, but I'll jump ahead. That is perfectly fine. So in the appendix area for leave request status, let's look at this. I guess it was good timing for this. Who can edit a leave request? User can edit their own leave requests. If it's initiated, yes. If it's rejected, yes. If it's approved, they cannot edit it. If it's exported, they cannot edit it. And if it's canceled, they cannot edit it. So I guess to answer that question before, if the status had been approved, I would not be able to go in and change it from sick to personal. At that point, I would have to cancel it and then put it in from scratch again. So the approver can edit their staff only. And this is kind of a recent change. It used to be that supervisors could not edit leave requests from their staff, but now they can. So under leave request approval, they can edit if it's in the initiated status, they can enter substitute info and they can upload files. So that's not a whole lot, but they can do that. Same with sub-coordinator. It shows kind of what they can do, which we kind of went over before. The leave manager, if you have leave manager access, under view district leave, you can change these areas. If it's rejected, you can't. If it's approved, you can still change these areas or do these things. And same if it's exported. And the district manager can also do these things when it's an initiated status, but not if it's rejected. And then if it's approved, they can edit the subfields, the professional leave area, and they can upload files. Same with exported. And Heidi has a great link to this, exactly what we're looking at here. And then it shows what admin like the meta staff can do. So we can do a lot more for a leave. And then it's asking who can approve or reject a leave request. The leave request approver can approve or reject it. They can do their staff's initiated leave requests only. They must be listed as the supervisor on their USPS position record, or be in that workflow. And then if you're a leave manager, a district manager, or admin under escalated approval, that's what I was looking for before. Under leave manager, which we hadn't gotten to yet. Let me go back to this area here. Leave management way towards the bottom, you can do escalated approval. There's Helen's. So since I have district admin or admin access, I could go in here and approve or reject Helen's request. If my supervisor was out sick or couldn't approve the request, or it was time sensitive and needed to be done now, as a district manager or as an admin, I could go under leave management and then do escalated approval. Okay. Would we ever have the ability in the future to change the type of request or not? Yeah, put in a ticket for an enhancement and we can definitely send it up there and see if they can do that for us. They're really good about trying to improve the software. Okay. Let's see. Let's go back to, we talked about calendars, job calendar. Okay. And then we did the leave request status stuff. And then it shows who can cancel a leave request. The requester can cancel it if it is an initiated or approved status. They can go back and cancel it. Obviously, if it's rejected, they can't, or if it's been exported, they cannot cancel it. So the requester, if it's been exported, there is a way to change that exported status back to approved, and then the requester could cancel it. So that is an option. So who can cancel a leave request? The approver can never do it. It just can't be canceled. They have to ask their employee to do it. The sub coordinator can, the leave manager, district manager, and admin can if it's an initiated or approved status. Then it can be canceled. And then the only people that can export a leave request to USPS would be the leave manager, a district manager, or an admin. Okay, so we'll get into more of those items here soon, but that was a good lead in to showing this. Okay, so Beth says we currently have 2-for-1 charge personal days on specific work days. For example, if an employee takes a personal day on the work day before or after Labor Day, they would be charged 2 personal days. Is it possible to configure the system to automatically charge 2 days on those at the time of the requested leave? That would be an enhancement request, like Heidi said. Go ahead and send that. Yeah, we'll be glad to turn that in for you. I will show blackout dates here shortly also. Okay, let's go back to this screen here. Okay, we looked at job calendars. Users, I did show you again how to create a user. You're going to want to make sure they're in USPS first. Make sure they have an email address, at least one email address in the main field. When you click create, you have to put in their email address, and then usually the email address is also their username. Now let's talk real quick about groups and group chains. Groups are the approval groups. So, this is just a demo, but it shows there is one approval group in here. So if we look at that, you give it a name and a description. You make it an and or an or. And requires all members of the group, and or requires just one person or one entity in the group to do the approval. So if you have more than one approver in here, and that's very common sometimes, make sure you set the and or correctly. If there's more than one approver, do you want both of them to have to approve it before it goes forward? They would be an and. Or do you want the first one to get to it to be able to approve it? And that would be the or. You can also have what we call viewers with notification. So I'm going to make, let's say, Alexis Anthony. I'm going to add her there to this approval group, but I don't want her to be an approver. I want her to be either read-only access or read-only access with notifications. Usually it's going to be with notifications because maybe she's the building secretary. You want her to see when the leave requests go in, but she is not somebody who can actually approve them. She just needs to know about them. So she will also get notified when those um, leave requests get put in. If she doesn't want an email and she wants to rely on the calendar, then she would just be in there with read-only access. And then she would also be able to view it on the calendar. Um, so they're either going to be a supervisor, or I'm sorry, an approver, or they're going to be in there with read-only or read-only access with email notifications. And you can have as many approval groups as needed. Most districts have a ton of them in there. A lot of times if we go into edit here, group members, one of the options is usually, there it is, supervisor. Okay, so if I say I need the supervisor to be the approver, that would be whoever is listed on the position screen in USPS. And we see that a lot instead of putting in a specific name. Whoever is listed as their supervisor would then be the approver. So once you have all of your approval groups set, you then go into group chains, which is the actual workflows. And again, you'll see a bunch of them in here. But you could set up the approval group, the group chain, the workflow to be very generic. Like you could have a catch-all for the whole district as just their supervisor. And then that would be something more like that. You can do specific leave types. So if I go into edit mode here, you could then say, okay, I want this one to be for personal, sick, and professional. And I'm not going to do it for specific employees, but you could have specific ones for maybe just a building principal or just a superintendent. You could do just specific pay groups. So if I wanted just my violet pay group to be part of this workflow, I could do that. You could do specific department codes only. So if your maintenance is Department 10, you could put them in there. Or Department 110, let's say, you could put them in there for this workflow, for this group chain. Certain building codes, certain subcategories if you have them built. So you can get very general or very specific as far as how you want the group chains set up. And we can definitely help you with that. We are very good at creating these groups and group chains for the workflows. We'll help you figure out exactly what you want to do, and we'll make sure that those are in there correctly for you. Or we'll at least get you started so you kind of understand how to build them, and then you can go from there. But it's important to get these right for leave notifications because these determine where the leave flows go and who gets notified about them. The other thing is, instead of doing multiple approvers in one approval group, most districts have it set up to where you have the supervisor as, let's say in the group, if I create one and just call it supervisor, and I make it an and, there's just going to be one in there, so and or doesn't matter in this case. And then let's say supervisor, and I'm going to create it. So now I have two approval groups. So I could then go into group chains, and instead of having the two approvers as part of one group chain or one approval group, I then go in here and say, okay, I want this new one to have supervisor as the approver. And um, let's just say all district, and we'll leave it at priority one. That's fine with no specific leave types or anything. And then I click create. Okay. So, and actually I didn't finish that. Let me go back in here. Let's change this to, let's change this to personal. That's a better example. And then for specific leave types, I'm just going to choose personal. So then let's say the first approval group is going to be the supervisor, and the second, let's pretend this is the superintendent. So instead of having the supervisor and the superintendent together in one approval group, it makes more sense to have them as separate. And then when the supervisor approves it, then it goes to the superintendent for final approval. So you don't want to have them both in there because then it would either have to be both approve it before it's approved or the first one to get to it. And that's just not ideal. Most districts have it set up where first it goes to the supervisor. Once that's approved, then it goes to the superintendent for final approval. If it's rejected at this point, then the superintendent would never see it. Okay, so if I save that, now I have a test one that is just going to, let's say again, the superintendent, but I have this other one for personal leaves that is going to first the supervisor and then the superintendent for approval. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, if I was to create a generic one, which I would recommend doing for just as a catch-all, if for some reason an employee was not set up correctly and they don't fit into a certain group chain, a certain workflow, you would want to have this created with nothing specific down here. And you would want to make sure that you use these little arrows here to move it down to the bottom, because what you need to realize is that the group chains closer to the top get looked at first. If it doesn't fit if the leave request doesn't fit a criteria in this one, then it drops to the next one. And if it can't find the employee in there, then it drops to this final one. So actually the all district one needs to be on the very bottom, and then they're guaranteed to be set. So if I hit these matched positions icon, it shows everybody in the district in that group chain. These again would be all the people that have eligibility for personal leave, whereas this one should show a few more people. It's just a test system, so it doesn't, but it would show a lot more people because it is not connected to a certain leave type or a certain building or a certain department. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, we can help you set all this up to make it all make sense and make it work for your district. Okay, any questions on users or approval groups or group chain workflows or anything like that? Okay. So we're going to keep going here under leave management. And again, only those with district admin access would be able to see this area. So absence thresholds is fun to say. This shows you can put in a certain building and the threshold percent you would enter. Let's look at the documentation here. That's probably the best place to look at it. So let me go down here. Sorry for my scrolling. Let's look at absence threshold, which is under, let me look again where it is. Oh, it's under leave management. So let's click leave management. Be patient till it gets there, and then leave management. And if you're bored and have time to go into some of these areas, there's actual video demonstrations of how to set them up. So if you have time to look at those, they're kind of cool. So absence thresholds allow you to specify the allowable percentage of absences for each building. This represents the maximum percentage who are permitted to take leave on a given day. So their example is building 300, the threshold would be 20%. So um, once the threshold is exceeded, in other words, if I hit 20% of absences for that building and I try to put a new leave request in, it'll generate an error and it will prevent the leave request from being posted. So they will see this error saying submitted leave request would exceed the possible amount of time for the following days. Please adjust this request or contact your district admin. So when the threshold is exceeded and you are approving a leave request, a warning notification will appear. Um, so the warning indicates that the number of leave requests for this date exceeds the allowable percentage. In other words, sometimes, if leave requests get through, maybe they're putting them in close to the same amount of time, then you would see this warning and it would allow you to make your decisions. Okay, so that kind of is how that absence threshold is used. If you want to get that set up, we can certainly help you with that. Okay, the next fun one is blackout dates. Okay, so blackout dates, if you click create here, this shows you everything you can do to create the blackout date. Give it a name, a start and end date, types of leave it's going to affect. Um, you can do it for specific employees or positions, specific pay groups or departments only. You can enable it or disable it. So you can create them quite a bit in advance and then go in and enable them. Or if your district policy changes and you need to disable it so they can put leave requests in the day before, you know, the Friday before Easter or whatever, you can disable it. And then you can say it's for the entire day or it's not. Okay, so let's look at the documentation about blackout dates. So they are a period of time during which leave requests are typically restricted, like before and after holidays. Um, and they are used in conjunction with the job calendars for employee positions, pay groups, and departments. So to create one, you're going to give it a label, check the notify managers, enabled in an entire day. Check entire day if it applies to the entire day, or leave it unchecked to select a starting and end time, like 2 hours, like a 2 hour delay. Starting and ending dates for the blackout date. Okay. And then any leave types that should be affected by that. So if it's only, say, if they can't request personal, then make sure you just select personal. You can filter by employee and their position or leave it blank to include all positions. And then it talks about doing the specific employees and then click create to save your blackout date. Okay, so then on the grid, it shows exactly what you put in. In this case, their example is New Year's Day from January 1st, 26 to January 1st, 26. And so nobody could put in a leave request on that date. And I'm going to talk about some FAQs on blackout dates toward the end. There's some good stuff in there. Okay. District leave analysis. I don't think it's going to let me show you that. Actually, it is. Good. So you can come in here, and I'm not going to get into this really deep for this training, but you can select certain people that you want to take a look at, or even maybe just one person. Then you hit see leave for selected, and it shows their information on the bottom. You can also do some filters for just vacation or a certain balance amount and so forth. I don't have a lot of data in the test instance, but once that's in here, you can export grid items. You can use this kind of like the more button to add or subtract certain things you want to see or not want to see on this grid area. So it's just kind of a way to get a report of this data, and it's only available in CSV. But if you select certain people you want to see for a certain date range, you can then export it into a CSV file and have this leave analysis report in spreadsheet format. I always double click and then it hits that other button, which I hate. Where did that show up? Let me see if I can open that again. There it is. So it's just a way to get that report for, in this case, just for Helen. Okay. Escalated approval we talked about. This is under leave management where supervisors or actually those with district admin or district manager status can go in and approve leaves when the actual approver cannot do it. Export leave requests. Okay, so if you have the particular role, this is where you're going to go into export your leave requests. So you're going to do it by a certain date range. So let's say March 1st through the 14th. You can also do it for specific employees, pay groups, buildings, only for certain leave types, and so forth. So there's not a whole lot that's showing up here. Let me make this a bigger range. Oops. Um, oh, Helen's is not fully approved. That's why. Um, But anyway, this is where you would go to have your leave requests, and there's usually a ton of them in here. So you do it by date range. You then select all of them. Then you can check or uncheck certain ones that you maybe don't want exported, but usually you're going to do everything within that date range. You can export leave requests, which sends them to USPS. But before you do that, you can print a pre-export report in USPS format, or you can print a grid extract report. So kind of look at those and see which format you prefer before you do the export, and then you can export leave requests. Um, there's an option, and I'm not sure why it's not showing here. Maybe it's how I have it set up. But you can send it directly to USPS from here, or you can create, I believe you create the grid extract report and then use the absence, um, what is that called? The absence import. Help me out here, meta people. I'm drawing a blank on the USPS side. The absence,
The attendance absence import under,
attendance absence. Thank you. I knew it
I'm
started with an
sorry.
A. The
I
attendance
drew
absence
one too, and
import.
I'm like, this isn't good. Sorry, Jane.
And that's exactly what you used to do in the kiosk. You used to export it out of the kiosk and then import it using that um, attendance absence import area in USPS. So you have the option of doing that here, or you can click export leave request and it will send it directly to USPS without you having to do that import. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Thank you, Jen, attendance absence import. Okay. So yeah, this is a fairly straightforward process. Something I really like is the export leave history, and I know Kiosk had this too, but you can go in, and this is very handy for users that need to cancel their leave. So maybe you've made the adjustment in USPS manually. You then need to revert their leave back here to approved so they can go in and cancel it so that you're kind of the same on both sides. Um, you can go into export leave history. You can find the date for the leave. You can select all to change the status of all of the leaves back from exported to approved. That comes in handy when you accidentally export sooner than you meant to, or you accidentally export with the wrong dates. Whatever the case may be, it allows you to change the status of those leaves from exported back to approved, and then you can go in and do the export correctly. Or you can find just a single person within that certain date and just change their particular status from exported back to approved. So that's very handy. You can do it for everybody in the date range that you exported, or you can pick and choose just those that you want to change from exported back to approved. So I like that. I like that change a lot. There is a leave expense report, and you can filter by date range. And I don't have any in here, of course. That's mostly for professional leaves. You know what I did not show you? Let me finish this out and then I'll show you in configuration. One of the most important things for setup. But let's look at subcategories real quick. You can create subcategories, and I know some districts have a ton of these. Um, but let's say it's for, I think you have to give it a code. You have to choose a specific leave type. So let's say it's sick. make sure it's active, put if you want to have a reason required. Um, I want to look at the documentation for, let me go back here. I'm going to go to, oh, I got to scroll down. Um, yeah, and that is under leave management subcategories. So those are not in USPS. They are only in ESS. But if you want to do certain leave categories, it has to be a two-digit code. So in this case, they put in PI for personal illness. And then they chose sick as the leave type. So some districts do for sick, they do personal illness, family illness, death in the family, whatever certain subcategories they have. Sometimes for personal, you can do specified or unspecified personal leave as a subcategory. So there's a lot of options there, but that is where you set up the subcategories for your leave requests if you have any. And then when they go to put a leave request in, if there's a subcategory that exists and they choose personal or sick, then the subcategory dropdown would show up. Leave adjustments is something that is fairly new. Leave adjustments, if you have the privileges to do that, they allow you to put a start and end date in and see, the leave adjustments need to happen when it's kind of a quicker way to fix a leave that you've exported that you need to change. So instead of reverting the leave history back from approved or back from exported to approved and then having the user cancel that leave and then put it in correctly, you can go in and create a leave adjustment for that particular leave and do like if you exported one day, you could put in an adjustment for one day and then it creates a file for a negative one that you can then export out of ESS into USPS, and then it fixes it for you. So it's kind of a way, and actually you wouldn't fix it manually in USPS in that case, you would let the system do it. It's a way to take your export that has already been put into USPS, create an adjustment for it in US or in ESS, and then move it back into payroll, and it fixes that for you. So again, that's something that is fairly new under leave adjustments. It allows you to create and export of leave request adjustments. You're going to use the filters to find the leave. You're going to click export selected adjustments to generate that CSV file. Once it's exported, the status of the leave request adjustment will be updated to exported. So this kind of shows you examples. It's kind of easier to see it with a screenshot here. So after you filter and find the leave that you need to do the adjustment for, you are going to go down a little here. So after applying filters and making selections, you're going to generate the CSV file containing the leave request adjustments. Once exported, the leave request will be updated with a note reflecting the adjustments. Okay, so it shows an example. Let's say this person had a sick day and it was approved, it was exported, it's now in USPS as one day. Turns out it needed to be half a day. So they use this adjustments area to put in 0.5. It then loads in the CSV file as negative 0.5, and they can then move it over into USPS, and then it shows up as a half a day instead of a full day. I don't think it would be used for anyone that does not have enough leave and needs to be docked. I think that would be a different situation. Um, they would then probably have to have that leave canceled and put in as a dock request instead. I think that'd be the way to handle that. Okay, so I know that was a little confusing, but it's a way to find the leave, put in an adjustment for that day for either, a one day or a half a day or a quarter day. And then it's entered as a positive, but it shows up on the CSV file as a negative, and then it can be exported out of ESS and moved into USPS so that the leave is corrected. So kind of a new thing, but kind of an interesting, good option to have. Okay. Real quick, I think it's time for our third joke, and then I want to go back into configuration and show you what I did not show you before. So the third joke, what is the best way to greet someone on March 17th? Anyone? Anyone? Well, the best way to greet someone on March 17th is to say, I wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. I wish you. Anyway, it's awful, I know. The last one will be amazing. You'll love it. So no worries there. All right, let's go back into configuration. Oh, that's Helen. Let's go back here to configuration, leave type configuration. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is kind of when we're setting up ESS with you, we're going to have you come in here and choose all the leave types that are available to be used for your district. Let's say you're not going to allow them to put in other or unknown. Let's say they are going to have vacation, sick, professional, personal, and then all of these as well. Let's say you don't allow them to put a calamity in because you'll do that. Um, Here's all these other boxes that are important that need to be check marked or not check marked. So reason required means, let's say for sick or personal, for doc, whatever the case may be, that reason field on the leave request becomes mandatory. So they can't put the leave request in unless they have a reason in there. That's what happens when reason required is check marked. Default substitute needed. Sometimes for, maybe sick or vacation, um, the default sub needed checkbox. Do you want it to be automatically check marked for this type of leave or not? That's where that would come in. Capture expenses, that's often put in for professional leave, and that brings up a different form during the leave request process that shows the vendor location. They can put in the number of miles and it calculates their mileage based on that 72.5 cents we put in, the event location, everything about the leave. Then they can print it out and have, a manager sign it or whatever. Um, there's not like an approval process it goes through that gets put back into ESS. You can go back in and reattach it to the leave if you want to using the upload. But there's no, I'm gonna have the manager sign it and then it gets put back in here for approval. That's kind of not how it works. So it's more informational. Subcategory required. If you created subcategories for sick or personal, and they're mandatory that they have to choose one when they choose sick or vacation or personal, you would make sure you have that check marked on this area. Okay. I'm going to skip disallow blackout date for now. Require cancellation reason. If they cancel any type of leave, you may want to know why, especially if it's for personal or professional or sick. And that requires a reason to be put in if they cancel it. If they cancel vacation, maybe you don't care why, it's just canceled. Disallow negative balances is a big one. So maybe especially for personal and sick, if they put in a leave request and they don't have enough leave, because it updates overnight every day, so it should be fairly up to date. If they put a leave request in and this is not check marked, it allows it to go through. It might give them a warning, but it still does allow it to go through. And then it's up to your supervisor or your approver to go in and decide whether to approve or reject it. So they really have to kind of pay attention to that. However, if you have disallow negative balances check marked, it just stops that user cold in their tracks. If they have a day left of sick leave and they try to put in 2.5 days, it's just going to stop them from putting in that leave request at all. Okay, so it's important to have all of this set up correctly. Disallow blackout date. I kind of just learned what this actually means. I used to think that it kind of worked similar to negative balances, but I wanted to show you in the documentation how that actually works. Okay, so let's go to, and I'm going to go over a lot of this here shortly. Again, sorry for the scrolling. I should go to the top and then I'll have choices. There we go. It's the first one, of course. Okay, so I want to talk more about blackout dates real quick. Do they appear on leave calendars? Yes, they show on calendars if the blackout date is enabled. How do I restrict users from creating a request on a blackout date? You have to have disallow blackout date checkmarked. So for any specific leave types that you want restricted, make sure that's checked. If it is checked, this will prevent an employee from creating a leave request for the specified leave type during a blackout period. A blackout date exception pop-up message will notify the user that the leave request is disallowed if attempting to create a leave request on a blackout date. Okay, so it does kind of work that way. Um, if you are on that screen and you have disallow blackout date checkmarked for whichever ones, and they try to request a leave, and it will stop them from doing it. If it's not checked, it will give them a warning, but still allow it to go through, and then it's up to the supervisor. Does the leave manager get notified when a leave request is created on a blackout date? Yes. So that if that box is not check marked and notify managers is marked, then the users with that manager role will be sent an email. If I have, okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to show you the most. If I have an existing leave request and a new blackout date is created that falls on the same date as my leave request, what happens to that request? So when the leave manager creates a blackout date and the corresponding leave type is set to disallow blackout dates, okay, so that means this box is checkmarked for that leave type. What that means is, um, so when you create that leave or when you create that blackout date, a pop-up will show up that says, the creator of the blackout date, oh, to the person putting in the blackout date, stating that there are existing leave requests that will be canceled once that blackout date is created. So you're the leave manager, you're going in and creating this blackout date. If that box is checkmarked for those leave types over here, then when you create it, you're going to get a box that says, hey, you can go ahead and create this blackout date, but all of these leaves are going to be canceled. Is that really what you want to have happen? And then if you proceed and say yes, those leave requests will be automatically updated to a canceled status. And then you'll receive an email notifying you that your particular leave request has been updated due to a blackout date. But it wants you to note it will only cancel leave requests with the status of initiated or approved. So it will not cancel exported or rejected leave requests. So if you create a blackout date, those have already been exported to USPS, then you'd have to revert them and get that fixed. But if they have approved or initiated status and you create a blackout date, then it will go ahead and cancel those requests on that blackout date. So hopefully that makes sense. Missy says, does it take into account future absences that have been submitted if you disallow sick and personal balances? Yes, it does. So it will take those into account. And if you have, but only if you have this box check marked here, then it will go ahead and cancel those leaves when you create the blackout date. Yeah, and as long as it's on the blackout date, if they're in the future, yeah, it will take those into account. As long as they're in initiated or approved status. Okay, so I wanted to show you that in configuration for putting a new sick day in. So if you put a new sick day in and it's in the future, is that what you're saying? And there's a blackout date on it, it'll still either give you a warning or stop you from putting it in, depending on if that box is checked. Does that make sense? So yeah, I mean, if the blackout date is in effect, then they put in a date for the future. If it hits that blackout date, then yeah, it'll stop them from doing that or give them a warning. Hopefully that answered your question, Missy.
Sir.
Okay. Yeah,
So I guess my question, it does, but it doesn't. So I thought I'm just gonna keep talking. We're gonna keep going
go
back
for
and
it. Go
forth.
for it.
So my question is, if we check the box to disallow sick and that they can't go beyond the sick and personal leave balances, and they've put leaves in, like at the beginning of the school year, and they put them in for during, right before spring break or something, and then now in February, they go in and try to put another sick day or personal day in that's going to happen before the one they've already put back in that's, going to happen at a later date, but they put it in back at the beginning of the school year. Does that work? Does that make sense?
No.
So they
No.
put they get 4 personal days. They
Yeah.
put all 4 of their personal days in for April.
Okay.
They put 3 of the 4 personal days in April.
Okay.
Okay. They put them into the system back in August. Now it's February, and
Hmm.
they want to try and put 2 personal days in. So that would put them
Okay.
over by 1. That's where my
Yes.
question is, does that take into account?
Yes. If their leave balance is going to go negative and you have this box checked, it will stop them from doing that
Okay.
because um, it knows they already have leave requests in for the future. I believe that is correct.
Yeah, Jason, there's
So,
a new look. There's a pending column
mhm.
that they can see under leave requests now. So they're going to be able to
Ah,
see their balance before they put that in even as well. So there's a double catch. The employee is going to see that they have pending leave, so they don't have the balance
mhm.
to do it. But two, it's not going to allow if this is flagged as well.
Okay. Great. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Good. Thanks, Heidi. Sorry it took a while. Okay. All right. Um, I am going to now get into the appendix area. So if you're on the main screen for um, the documentation, you can scroll down and you'll eventually see the appendix area. And within this appendix area, there's a lot of great information for you. There's a frequently asked questions area. There's that leave request status area I believe we already looked at here for who can create or who can see what. And then um, let's go over some of these FAQs. FAQs. I'm not going to go into huge detail here. We just looked at the blackout dates. Um, Something that people ask is who gets the email notifications for leave requests? Does a requester receive an email notification once their leave request has been submitted? Does their approver? Yes, the requester will. Um, they will also they'll also send an email to each approver in the group chain when it's been submitted, and so they can approve that leave request. Group members with the read-only access with notifications will also receive an email notification. Does the requester receive an email if their approved leave request is canceled, and does their approver? Yes, they both do. When do members of a group who have read-only access with notification get an email? They'll get an email when a leave request has been approved, rejected, or canceled. When I submit a data change request on my employee record, do I get notified by email when the change has been made? Does the data change manager get notified? Currently, the requester will not receive an email notification when their record has been submitted, approved, or updated. However, the data change manager will receive an email notification as long as the setup has been configured. In other words, once you submit that data change request, um, check back frequently, see if it's been updated. If it hasn't, then maybe ask your payroll person about it. Otherwise, it should be updated fairly quickly and you'll see that change. Our district is tracking subs needed on the ESS system. Is the sub coordinator notified if a leave request is created, canceled, or rejected? Yes, they are. Okay, do leave balances in leave information take into account all the leave requests I currently have in ESS? It does not. The balances under the leave information come directly from USPS. It will not tally up your outstanding leave requests and produce a balance that includes them. So that is clarification on what we just talked about. However, like Heidi said, when creating a new leave request and selecting the desired leave type, it will display your current leave balance, including ongoing leave requests. So if you currently have sick leave balance of 15 days, your sick leave balance under ESS will display 15 days. However, if you have an outstanding sick leave request for one day that has not been exported and posted to USPS, when creating a new sick leave, your ongoing leave request will display 14 days. So it will subtract your outstanding one. If you have exported leave requests that have not been loaded into USPS, they are not subtracted from your ESS leave information balance. So that would be another reason to use the direct to USPS instead of doing the CSV file import. Okay, we're kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to go down a little bit. I wanted to get to a couple of them in particular. So it's asking who could create, edit, cancel, or approve or export a leave request. That's where the leave request status, which I showed earlier, comes into account. My district had a calamity day. There are leave requests for that day. What do I need to do? The action you take depends on the status of the leave request and whether it has been exported. For those requests that have an initiated or approved status, creating a blackout date under leave management will cancel those leave requests based on the leave type if you have disallow blackout date selected. But if you don't, then they won't be canceled. So when I create the blackout date, my disallow blackout date is checked for calamity, jury, sick, and vacation, but not for personal. So all of these leave requests would be canceled, but my personal leave request from that blackout date would not be canceled. Okay. Oh, another thing, multi-day leave requests that are also part of the blackout date. Um, those will show on the blackout date leave request details tab. So you'll have to take a look at those. This shows you what the colors signify on the leave calendars. Blue is in progress or outstanding, initiated. Green is fully approved. Red is rejected or canceled. And black signifies that they're exported. Dates on the calendar shaded in black signify they are district blackout dates. Okay, so that's kind of something to keep in mind if you're wondering what the colors mean. This talks about how you can see or cannot see certain things on the leave calendar. Sometimes it's a matter of doing your filters for certain buildings or certain departments or certain pay groups that you have access to. We did not get a whole lot of time to talk about timesheets. It's almost 3 o'clock. What I do want to say about timesheets, it is definitely not a time clock program, so don't get the idea that it's a full time system. It is not time clock, it is simply timesheets, and it's a fairly straightforward program. We do have a handful of districts using it, which is why I didn't spend a ton of time on it because not a ton of districts are using it right now. But what has to happen is we'll help you set it up to create shifts for all of your employees that are applicable. And you have to create a lot of different shifts. Basically, if you have an employee working a certain shift, that shift has to be in there for them to be able to do a timesheet. Then you have to set up all of the periods. So you have periods that are often the same as your beginning and ending dates for your payroll. There's also something called an automatic period generator, which automatically creates those periods for you as time goes on, which is very handy. But basically, a user goes in to create a timesheet. Once all of that is set up, they have a shift, they're in the correct period. They create a timesheet by going in here and selecting the period. I know that's kind of hard to see. They select their position. The timesheet will be pre-filled with the information from the corresponding period and shift that have been set up. Then it shows like this. So this is the timesheet that shows up. They then have the option of editing the time or the number of hours worked. So they can do all that. Once they have everything selected correctly, they then click, it's a two-part process. They click save, but once they click save, it has not yet been submitted. They actually then have to click submit to submit it for approval. And there's a little bit more to this program. and a lot of different options. You set up the workflow very similar to how you do it for the ESS leave requests. In fact, if you're in here under, let's make sure I'm in the correct account here. If I go to users and I look at my groups, I have a timesheet option in here if timesheets are turned on for your district. So you can, in leave requests, there is a copy to timesheet group, and that moves it over to the timesheet tab. So you can set the same approval groups and group chains for your timesheets as you do for your leave requests, and that's very handy. Or you can create them manually and do it yourself. Same with the group chains. There is a spot for timesheets. You can also copy the current ones from the leave request over into the timesheet area, and that kind of sets up your supervisors and your approvers for the timesheets. Keep hitting the wrong thing there. So then the supervisor goes in for timesheet approval. They look at all the timesheets for whoever they approve. They have the option to edit those, to approve them, to reject them. They can mass approve or mass reject timesheets. And then they get put into USPS, which is great instead of you having to do that manually. So sorry I didn't have a ton of time to talk about that. I want to be respectful of your time today. It is already after 3 o'clock, but if you do want to get started on timesheets, just throw a ticket in, send us an email. We'll be glad to talk to you more about that and see if it's right for your district or show you a little more about it, and help you get that set up. And we do have, there are videos on our webpage, I think, or actually we could point you to some SSDT demos on the timesheet. Some of them are a little more technical that you really don't care about, but you could see a little bit more about the timesheets if you wanted to implement those in your district. Okay, so I'm going to ask for questions now, but first I'm going to get to the final joke here real quick for St. Patrick's Day. Hope everyone's having a great one and wearing their green. How can you tell if an Irishman is having a good time? Anyone? How can you tell if an Irishman is having a good time? Because he's doubling over with laughter. Give me some big eye rolls, I know. Does anyone have any questions on anything that we talked about for ESS? Anything at all? Beth is asking if an employee is terminated in USPS, will that automatically terminate their access to ESS? That's a very good question, and no, it will not. So you're going to want to go into ESS and you're going to go to users and users. You would want to go in, let's say Brent Hurst is terminated. You would want to go in here and go into edit mode. And this might be something only that we can do. I cannot remember, but you might be able to then make sure they are no longer enabled and hit save. Okay. Something else to think about though, if you leave them enabled, you can let them know that they have a certain period of time, like 30 days, or maybe even indefinitely, where they can go in and still view their payslips and W-2s. So if you want to take their access away, you can, or you can ask us to do it for you. But if you want them to be able to see their payslips and W-2s over time, you can still give them access to ESS. There's not really a danger of them seeing any personal information. It's only their own information. Even if they're terminated in USPS, as long as that email address is still in the email field on their employee screen, they should be able to still log into ESS and then see their payslips and W-2s. Good question. Yes, timesheets will also reflect absences entered. I did see that in the documentation. I did want to mention that too. So thank you, Heidi. Absences from leave requests will then flow over into timesheets, which is very nice. It's very handy. Does the timesheet module talk? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I know there's a lot to the program. So if you are not using ESS and want to get set up, we can help you with that. If you were never used kiosk and want to start fresh, we're moving on to districts that we can do that for now. So feel free to send us a ticket and let us know you're interested. I know Beth is typing away, or you can unmute Beth and ask whatever you want. Yeah, please unmute.
Okay, just a couple of clarifications, I guess I think I got lost somewhere along the way, so I wanted to make sure.
Sure.
So if a user is set up in USPS, then do you have to manually set them up in ESS, or does the sync that happens take care of that?
It does not automatically take care of that.
Okay,
So you will need to add them to USPS. Um, the thing is, when you are in ESS and you go to users and you click create, so what determines if they show up here in this list or not is if they have been synced with USPS. So if I add a person today and then I go right to ESS to try to add them, they may not show up in this list until you do a manual sync from USPS. If you try the next day when it's had a chance to sync overnight, then they would show up there. But that's just something to keep in mind. They need to be in USPS first. They then need to be synced if you want them to show up here, which you definitely do want them to show up in the select employee area. Does that make sense?
yep, yep. And then kind of similarly with when you're exporting leave,
Mm-hmm.
let me understand again, you definitely have to export the leave to USPS, or does that automatically happen with the sync without the export?
You do have to do it yourself.
Okay,
It is not an automatic process. In other words, when a certain date rolls around, it just doesn't automatically do it. So you have to manually do it, but you do have two choices. You can click export and it just fires straight to USPS,
okay,
or you can export to create a CSV file. You save it to your computer, then you go into USPS and go to the absence attendance import area and import it manually using the CSV file.
okay. One more
So
question
those are
and
your two options.
then I will shut it down. One more question.
That's
Um,
okay.
Did I hear correctly when you said if there's a subcategory on an absence, such as, sick time is personal, death in the family, whatever,
Hmm.
illness,
Yeah.
family illness, whatever. Did you say
Yeah,
those do or do not carry over into USPS on export?
they do.
They do.
I
Okay.
kind of maybe misspoke there because they are not created or stored in USPS. But when you're manually putting in an absence for somebody in USPS, you do have the subcategory option, So that's what flows into from ESS into USPS. The subcategory then shows up in that record in USPS. Does that make sense?
No, you lost me again. So if the subcategory is in the leave piece and you
Yes.
export into USPS, then the subcategory will be there. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to know.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, and that's really the main thing you need to know.
all right. Okay, great. Thank you guys.
You're very welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Want to unmute or type anything in? Okay. Thanks for hanging with me for a couple hours. Sorry the jokes were bad. Hopefully you got a little entertainment out of them. If you have any questions you think of afterward, feel free to email or send a ticket in and give us a call. We'll be glad to help you out with that. And the recording of this will hopefully be posted, hopefully sometime tomorrow. You can let other people know who might need to see this, all about it. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.